Hey guys, on here, welcome back. Today we're going to be checking out new Rockstars breakdown of episode 5 of Ahsoka. This week's episode was insane. And, you know, if you guys missed my reaction, I was a little under the weather at the time. I still am. I think I'm on the upward swing now. I will tell you that I was just on that cusp for episode 5 when I was watching that. You know, I got the video out, and I think I had a pretty coherent enough reaction and thoughtful enough discussion after the fact of the themes and everything throughout. But my God, I think it took all I had in me to get that out, because the next few days after that hit me like a truck, and I was just helpless. Oh my God. Dude, I slept like 13 hours a day, and I just could not, for the life of me, keep my eyes open without it, just my head pounding. So I haven't been able to see too much of the discussion around the episode, or what other nuggets may have been found throughout there, and I haven't really gotten to think about the episode too much after the fact either. I'm excited to see what all new Rockstars has dug up, now that I have a little bit of some conscious awareness of my surroundings. So let's go ahead and strap in and see what they have found. Guys, if you're not subscribed to these guys, make sure to do so. I'll have a link to this video, to the original video, down in the description below. Make sure to check that out, give it a like, subscribe, and yeah, let's go ahead and jump in. Here we go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Ahsoka Episode 5, Shadow Warrior, a love letter to Clone Wars with Hayden Christensen as a Clone Wars era Anakin Skywalker
Hell
and young
yeah.
Ahsoka Tano, played by Ariana Greenblatt, aka young Gamora in Avengers Infinity War. But who exactly was our Shadow Warrior this episode? Was it
I also did not realize she was also the daughter in Barbie.
the living force embodying Ahsoka's old master, or the dark side of Darth Vader finishing the Malachor fight in the World Between Worlds, or something even cooler? I'm going to break down all the Clone Wars callbacks and other interesting production details that you might have missed, from the music and the sound design to amazing attention to detail in the lightsaber choreography of this episode. And yeah, folks, I did it again. It's like 2 a.m. Pacific time as I record this after spending 8 hours writing this analysis. What am I doing? But you know what? I approach these breakdowns as a labor of love, not just as like a review or a reaction or a list of Star Wars trivia or a bunch of weird takes to make you feel like less of a Star Wars fan. I do this because I am so grateful to Dave Filoni and all the cast and crew for giving us
All
these great stories. And I just want to celebrate the craftsmanship that they
Dave.
put into this. I'm grateful to you for letting this channel be part of your Ahsoka experience. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and let's dive in.
Hell yeah,
Video
man.
is
No,
always
thank
the
you,
Lucasfilm
dude.
sequence.
Dude, I do not envy the amount of work that they put into, not just for these individual breakdowns and stuff, like just for their entire channel, man. Like, it's a labor of love and nothing but.
It's a Vader, 3PO,
They reach sometimes, but still, they're great.
And Sabine's helmet. And finally, this episode pays off us spotting that Clone Trooper helmet, as this episode gives us 2 cameos of Clone Trooper Rex.
That it
Both
does.
When he was a captain during the Clone Wars Season 1 era on Ryloth, and when he was a commander of the 332nd Company in the Siege of Mandalore in Clone Wars Season 7. But really just take a moment to appreciate
Yeah,
the
they
music
did.
here.
Dude, the music all season has been the
Closed
best.
captioning calls this soft ethereal music. Composer Kevin Kiner tweeted that the music of this episode would be special, with a video of his kid Deanna Kiner on flute. They were co-credited with Kevin and Ludwig Göransson and Noah Gorlick for writing that sick Igyaka track from episode 1. And in this intro, we're really
Nice.
hearing the purr of the flute mixed with the singing bursts of the flute, like Ahsoka's patient current age trying to reconcile with her impatient youth. We begin this episode on Cetos, and we get this close-up of the pedestal that held the spear, where Morgan Elsbeth summoned the green Night Sister flames, and we see how this pedestal is forked, kind of like the shape of Vader's tower on Mustafar. And we see the split halves of that spear, and gears and cogs now exposed.
Yeah.
It really was simple, old school machinery, Rubik's Cubable by any art history nerd, that this device was meant to open up to, and Morgan and Elsbeth cheated by using witchcraft to jailbreak it. They violated the intent of whoever the ancient Star Wars Archimedes was who engineered this Antikythera. Jason, we
You know, I mentioned the reaching just a minute ago. I don't know that any of that correlated with what was going on there. You know, it was already unlocked. She didn't use magic to do anything except activate the podium. She didn't, like, breach it by force or anything like that. So I'm that comparison a little bit. I'm a little iffy on, but we'll continue.
Pointed out last week, where's his father, Kanan Jarrus' pauldron on his shoulder?
A little teeny version of it
that Kanan shared with the Doom Wolf on Lothal and Rebels, and there's actually a photograph of Kanan Jarrus pinned to Hera's dashboard, and it's hard to tell, but it does kind of look like they might have used Freddie Prinze Jr. as a model for it.
Dude, we need to figure out who's on that photo. It very well could be Freddie Prinze, and it probably should be Freddie Prinze. But yeah, I would like to confirm who they actually have on the actual set photo for that.
He was the actor who voiced Kanan on Rebels. And since Jason plays such an important role this episode of sensing the lightsaber combat through the world between worlds, they actually tease Jason's lightsaber hearing in this moment as we actually hear a lightsaber hum in the sound mix right before Jason pops his head out from behind Chopper. Huyang laments,
I didn't hear it.
But they never listen. They never listen.
Yes, David Tennant voices this to be so mournful, and his poor droid eyes just droop sorrowfully. It was he in episode 4 who begged them to stay together, and it was only because Ahsoka did not see Sabine and assume that she died that led to both of their failures. And yes, Huyang repeats, they never listen, and you kind of feel like he's talking about all of the Jedi in general. Like all the younglings he guided to their kyber crystals and instructed how to build their hills, eventually grew up into these stubborn warriors who got involved in political wars and distrusted, deceived, and destroyed each other. Indeed, they never listen. So from here, we cut to this episode's title reveal, Shadow Warrior. And yes, we feel like Huyang is talking about the most infamous node in this legacy of wayward Jedi who never listen, Anakin Skywalker. But it's not just Anakin. There's a cool, deeper meaning to this that I'll discuss at the end of the video.
You know, I just thought about that too, and I brought it up in my reaction initially when the title came up. I was like, oh, I wonder what that was going to mean. I don't remember if I left it in or not, but I do remember questioning the title, you know, and I don't believe I ever even came back to the thought, even back in the discussion afterwards. I don't know that I ever even revisited the question of what that meant. And I don't really have a good answer. You know, I feel like you could probably say Anakin just in the literal sense, because he is this shadow warrior, whether he be ghostly or memorially from her mindscape, whatever your interpretation of him is. You could also say figuratively or literally because of his connections to the dark side, the Vader himself being of the shadows. Other than that, I don't really have like a direct pull for that one, so I'm curious to see what his take on that's gonna be.
We rejoin Anakin and Ahsoka in the world between worlds. Now, I've explained this cosmic dimension in a number of videos, most recently this one that actually goes into Dave Filoni's actual intention and proves why, you know, at the end of the day, it's probably not best to get too carried away with the deep cut fan theories about the gods of Mortis and whatnot when it comes to this kind of thing, because really this is Ahsoka's subjective experience. It's about her dealing with what she brought into this place. Meanwhile, for a fuller context of really everything you need to know from Rebels, please check out our 4-part Rebels recap series. Very, very informational and helpful. So Dave Filoni wrote and directed this episode, but the cinematographer was Kuyan Tran, who frames every shot with stunning composition. Like as we cut to Anakin's view of Ahsoka, notice the path behind her curves off to the left, but when we see Ahsoka's view of Anakin, his path ends. It just kind of ends in a cul-de-sac there. Ahsoka took some turns to get here, but to follow Anakin down his path would lead to the end of the road. So the two greet each other.
That's so true. That's a good point.
You look old.
Well, that happens.
Yes, they de-aged him in Christensen so that he would look the most like her memory of him from right before Revenge of the Sith, but Anakin comments on Ahsoka's...
Well, I mean, it's also more than that. It just depends on if you're going with he's the memory conjured here by her mindscape in the world between worlds, or if he is physically Anakin, the Force Ghost, which is still where I lean, even after the fact, because I know, like I said, I want to believe that is the case, but the more and more I've kind of digested the episode, I wholly believe it is maybe throughout the episode a mix, but I think here, anytime we're here, it's Anakin. Which that case is that, you know, he looks as he does when he became one with the Force after Luke, you know, after Luke saved him in Return of the Jedi, after he died as Vader, he becomes that younger self. And that's something that Lucas has echoed multiple times about the Force ghost forms that they take is when they were last uncorrupted or untouched by the dark side or the full-on pull to it. So the last time they were light is when what they revert to once they come back anyway. And again, like I've said before, we're in the world between worlds. We're here. Like, it's just physically here, whatever. Like, that's, again, we can talk about that later. It is connected directly to the cosmic force, so there's no reason for Anakin to have that ghostly distortion here, because this is where he resides. This is where they reside. This is their access to the ins and outs of time and space across the galaxy as these specters, but so here you're kind of in their world. So, it just makes sense that he wouldn't be ghosty here. So anyway, that's a long way to go about what we're actually talking about here. So we'll just kind of dive right back into where we're at.
Because, she's played by Rosario Dawson, and the character would be like 50 now, aging older than he was in Revenge of the Sith. And now, 5 or so years after Return of the Jedi, might be getting closer to his age at his time of death. Even in Ahsoka's various eras of animation between Clone Wars and Rebels, she goes through a dramatic physical change into adulthood. Anakin says,
I'm here to finish your training.
It's a little late for that.
One is never too old to learn, Snips.
Remember, in episode 1 of the series,
Hearing
Ahsoka
him say
told Hera
Snips,
that
man.
Anakin never completed her training. He had spent years as her master during Clone Wars seasons 1 through 5, but Ahsoka abruptly left the Jedi Order at the end of season 5. And in Rebels season 2 episode 18, Ahsoka watches an old recording that Anakin had made for her as he taught her Form 4 lightsaber combat. So Ahsoka has truly longed for closure with her mentor, and Anakin explains the point of this final lesson.
Live or die.
This episode teaches us that living or dying isn't really a question of lightsaber skills, it's letting go of what you fear to lose. One of the things we heard in the Rebels World Between Worlds episode was Yoda to Anakin from Revenge of the Sith.
Rejoice for those around you who transform into the Force. Attachment leads to jealousy. Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose.
And now, Ahsoka's most afraid to lose Sabine, and that is what's holding her back, because it's a lesson that Anakin never really could have taught her. But here, Ahsoka says,
I won't fight you.
I've heard that
before.
This is a fascinating response from Anakin, because it sounds like it's referring to when Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi says this to Vader as he tosses his saber.
I will not fight you, Father.
Which would mean that this Anakin would have the memory of being Darth Vader and dueling his son in the Battle of Endor, something that Ahsoka probably wouldn't know about unless she and Luke chatted about it, when they were crashing Boba Fett's miniseries. It could also refer to when Ahsoka...
That also is just very specific. Even if they talked about the exchange, or maybe not even the exchange, but the confrontation as a whole, wouldn't she know enough of that conversation, or would he have said the exact words he told him in that moment? We'd be like, hey, and then I was like, I will not fight you, Father. And how does that conversation go? I mean, it very well could. It just feels a little too contextually specific for me.
Faced Vader on Malachor in the Rebels season 2 finale. Initially, she said that she wouldn't leave Anakin, but then she swore to avenge Anakin.
Revenge is not the Jedi way.
I am no Jedi.
Either way, this is not a friendly sparring match between Master and Apprentice. This is really a rematch between Ahsoka and Vader. It's meant to provide closure for that conflict. And Anakin doesn't hold back. His aggressive lunges are just like his combat style against Obi-Wan on Mustafar. And at one point, he stabs his saber directly forward, which is Palpatine's favorite move. Actually, I want to give a compliment to K.Rennick on last week's breakdown for pointing out how Ahsoka's stance while fighting Marok in episode 4 was the same as Palpatine's in Revenge of the Sith. Amazing insight, and thank you to everyone who writes these kind of thoughtful comments. It really means a lot to be able to engage with you all in the comments with this kind of great conversation. So Hera searches for Ahsoka using the same bulky scanner with the antenna that Han Solo used to search for Luke on
Hoth. I didn't even notice that.
Comes in and says,
Senator Organa says she can only give us cover for so long.
He's Leia Organa. I freaking love that Leia knows Hera and knows Carson, and she's just helping them sneak around like this. This, of course, is going to be part of Leia's ongoing campaign to form a resistance fleet outside of the New Republic government oversight. Though at this point, she's still a senator. At some point in the future, she's going to be run out of office once the broader public.
Which is interesting, because with that in mind, Carson also, around this time, has his own little under the table bounty hunter working for him, loosely under the Republic, you know? So that puts Din Djarin kind of on this resistance side, this little undercover covert army that's kind of being built, with Carson kind of being a little bit of a connective tissue there. Nice little thing, nice little touch there.
Knows that her father was Darth Vader. This is something that gets explored in Claudia Gray's Bloodline novel. Now, Jason says he senses something in the water. He and Hera turn to Chopper, who chimes in. Yeah, it's just one of my favorite dumb things to try to decode what Dave Filoni utters as Chopper for all these moments. And here, I'm pretty sure he says, well, I got nothing. But Hera closes her eyes and she listens with her son.
The lightsabers.
Yeah, okay. Listen. Nobody's finding that body right now. Like, people are just like, okay, a lot of things I've seen people say is like, you know, that's like she's physically in the water and all this is in her mind. I was like, her body's not there. Like, if it was, like you said, like the scanners, everybody, Carson, of all people, the man who, this is not, I don't want to steal this. I saw this from Eric over a Blind Wave. It's like, Carson is the guy you send that finds people. He always finds who he's looking for. If Carson says there's no body in the water, there was no body in the water. Chopper didn't find nothing. The only person hearing anything or finding anything right now is him, the Force kid. So, like, I wholly think she's transported there until she is returned at the completion of her trial, when they are finally able to find her again. What they're sensing or looking for is a distortion. Until then, that's where I'll die on that hill. But, you know, I definitely understand the other angles on it. I just don't give myself into it, though. Anyway, back on. God, the swell of the Force theme
here. All season long, Kevin Kiner has flirted with Williams' themes with leitmotifs, but he just alters little things about them. But here he leans hard into it. Jason is able to hear this from the world between worlds, telling us that it's not just Ahsoka's delusion down there, it is a real realm that she is visiting. And everyone with a Force connection is able to tap into it. And a reminder that the runes at the edge of the Stonehenge platform are the language that we began to decode in our closing credits map translation video. Definitely a good watch. These runes translate to 2100, which I think might just be a distance to Peridia. Not really sure, but I absolutely love Paul Sun-Hyung Lee's delivery here.
Jason has abilities. His father, Kanan Jarrus, was a Jedi.
Okay.
God, that's still, I think, you know, all of the callbacks, all of the Hayden Christensen, all of that is amazing, right? Cannot deny it. That still might be one of my favorite parts of this entire episode, was that. Because that is basically the reaction of everybody that has not watched the Clone Wars or Rebels right now. It's like, all right. The defeat, the fucking attitude is what I love about it. And his delivery is just so good.
That most people in this universe think the Force is really silly and really spooky. Okay, so back to Anakin and Ahsoka's duel. Anakin
the flourish.
This is the same move that he and Obi-Wan did to mirror off each other in the Mustafar room where Anakin had killed all the Separatist leaders. You remember that moment where they went, and then Anakin does another Palpatine stab, but Ahsoka repels it by doing the same behind the back block pose that we often saw Anakin doing during the prequel era. And that familiarity is what seems to catch him off guard, because he allows Ahsoka to get a solid kick on him. But what Ahsoka hadn't noticed is that Anakin's aggression forced her down his end of the path to that dead-end cul-de-sac I pointed out earlier. That is all he wanted to do here, to just lead Ahsoka to this dead end so that he could move on to the next phase of his lesson.
Speaking of the whole lesson, right? This is something I didn't think of until later. Like, this cul-de-sac, this little like end point here where he's trying to prove a point. He's trying to make her decide to choose to live, right? That's the goal, at least, for the lesson, is to move beyond this precipice, or at least choose where she's going to go. But he's trying, like, obviously, as the master, as the person providing the lesson, you're pushing the challenge. So he's guiding her to this endscape where she needs to learn, right? So basically, she's got two pathways. Coming back to what he said before, one is looping and we don't see the end of it. That's the life. That is, I choose to live. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, and we'll be able to see this later, when she says, I choose to live, she's facing that direction. I mean, obviously she's facing that direction now, but anyway, that's where she ends up going, right? And then here's where that ends. That would be if she had chose to die, if she had chosen to give up. You know, this is the road that ends. That is the road that continues. I don't know. Anyway, I might be making something out of nothing there.
I haven't taught you everything yet.
So he slices the path to break the floor beneath Ahsoka's feet, kind of like the Balrog breaking Gandalf's path and causing her to fall through the floor. But it's also kind of like the way Vader fell through the floor during their duel on Malachor in Rebels, right when Ahsoka got pulled through into the world between worlds. So Ahsoka tumbles down this rabbit hole through.
No, we haven't seen Mora yet. I'm surprised we hadn't in this season yet.
Greenblatt. Yes, young Gamora from Infinity War and a number of other roles, like she was in Barbie this year, playing the youth version of Snips that we got to know in the early seasons of Clone Wars. This casting is so good. Greenblatt is perfect.
Yeah,
in this
she's
role.
doing a
We see
great
clone
job.
troopers running past her, some of them with the blue-lined armor and the long rifles, and we see a younger version of Anakin. Forward!
And the Phase 1 troopers, man.
Young Ahsoka is back to wearing her headband and the beaded headdress that goes down the back of her laku that Ahsoka had in her original teenage character design, though luckily they don't have the goofy
a little bit of a retcon going on.
See that she has her original lightsaber, which had a green kyber crystal, and then Anakin, Hayden Christensen,
God, looks so good.
Same haircut and the Jedi armor that the animators made for him in the Clone Wars series, and in the background of that fog of war, you can see a Republic AT-TE or AT Walker, which would eventually evolve into the Imperial AT-AT or AT-AT. We also see an LAAT transport or LAT transport gunship, which was first introduced in Attack of the Clones. We're back in the Clone Wars and it's live action. I can't believe we're seeing this. But yes, this is not a flashback because Ahsoka still has her adult mind. She's kind of reliving the memory.
This is the Clone Wars.
Kind of in like a holodeck kind of way. Or a danger room kind of way.
I'm basing this on the Twi'leks that we see in the background in the aftermath.
See, that was my assumption, but I heard some people say that it was Geonosis. I mean, it still very well could be, but yeah, for the same reason, I assumed we were on Ryloth.
This is likely the Ryloth Arc at the end of Season 1 of Clone Wars, Episode 19, Storm over Ryloth, Episode 20, Innocence of Ryloth, and Episode 21, Liberty of Ryloth. In Episode 19, Anakin and Ahsoka lead some clone troopers to break a separatist blockade of Ryloth, but Ahsoka disobeys Anakin's orders and she gets a bunch of clone pilots killed. Episode 20 follows Obi-Wan liberating the droid-occupied town on Ryloth, and then Episode 21 shows their eventual victory with Mace Windu introducing us to Hera's father, the
Cham
fighter, Cham Syndulla. So I think these desert sands are the Duxtuan desert that Mace Windu credits Obi-Wan with securing on Ryloth's southern hemisphere in Episode 21. And since we didn't really see where Anakin and Ahsoka were for those second two episodes, I think we are seeing the events that Anakin reported to Palpatine and Yoda here.
My fighters have secured control of the space around Ryloth. We have the Separatist cruisers on the run.
And yes, one of these blue-plated clone troopers is Captain Rex, because the episode credits list Tamora Morrison as playing both Commander and Captain Rex. Yeah, that is Rex talking to Anakin and the Twi'leks there. And yes, just a reminder that Ryloth is Hera's home world, where in Rebels, she tried to retrieve her precious family Kalikori that Jason now likely has a bead on. So part of what Jason is sensing through the world between worlds is the history that directly involved his maternal grandfather, Cham Syndulla. Young Ahsoka places her hand on this wounded clone trooper, and he places his hand on hers. And you know that we're just supposed to imagine that's 2002 Tamora Morrison's face under those wrappings. But this isn't just Ahsoka showing her emotional attachment to these fighters. She is still feeling horrible over her decision in Storm over Ryloth that got a bunch of these guys killed. And actually, the music we hear in this moment is Kevin Kiner's Burying the Dead music that played in the Clone Wars finale over shots of Ahsoka burying members of the 332nd.
Yeah. I didn't even make that connection, man.
Ahsoka asks Anakin.
You know, too, what was it? In Tales of the Jedi, which my reactions to that are not on this channel. You can check those out with me and Greg over at The Real Rejects for Tales of the Jedi. But correct me if I'm wrong, the first episode of Ahsoka where she's born, wasn't that Life and Death? Where her mother is like taking her on that like ritual hunt to kind of instill this appreciation for life and death. You know, there is this balance to the world, and, you know, just naturally and culturally, it would seem like too that Ahsoka's just got this connection because it's just very integral to her being, right? Regardless of how the greater Republic feels about clones and all of that, or just life in general, she just like holds it so sacred, all life, you know, and, you know, she feels this pain for this decision that she made that cost the lives of these soldiers, even though, you know, they were bred for this purpose. This was why they were created, you know, but she sees each and every one of them as more than that. And that was one of the reasons why her escape during Order 66 was way harder than it may have been for any other Jedi, for that matter, because she did everything she could in her power to not kill any of the troopers while she was trying to evade capture and death. So, you know, it's just really interesting tying it back to that, you know, that she's, or like that comes back into play here. And I think that's just like a core concept of the character in general that they accentuated in that one little episode that just helped kind of further define Ahsoka's value for life and death. And again, now she's at this point, though, where she's got to make a decision between life and death for herself, because we'll get into it a little bit more, but like she's so affected by these negative points in her past that she's been stuck basically in stasis. She makes a comment later in the episode about, I think like when they're taking off, we'll get to it. So like we'll have the exact wording later, but like when she's talking about, we have no idea where we're going when the Purrgil make the jump. He's like, we could be going anywhere. And he's like, anywhere is better than nowhere. And that's kind of where Ahsoka has been like spiritually since Order 66. She's been just in a pocket. She's never kept herself, allowed herself to really move beyond that point. And this is Anakin coming in with this lesson as an ultimatum here. It's like, listen, you either move forward and you live, or you stay in the past and you die with it. I don't know. It's just a little thought that came into mind once I started thinking about her value on life, and bringing that back to the Tales of the Jedi episode where she's born. And it's just her whole essence is life and death, and just really life at the core of it all, you know, with the whole like attachment to the daughter, to the light side, to the Morai. You know, she's kind of become, or will become rather, when she becomes this Ahsoka the White, if you will, when she chooses life, this avatar for that. That's another question we'll get into, which we'll get into. That's a whole other conversation. I don't want to hold up the video all right now, so let's get back into it.
But our mistakes cost lives. That doesn't bother you?
Of course it does.
This isn't what I trained for.
Yeah, young Ahsoka is recognizing how traumatic it was for young Jedi to transition from peacekeepers to military commanders. It's part of why this series' tagline was Warrior Outcast Rebel Jedi, which we embrace with our Ahsoka-inspired Fulcrum shirt, which you can get at nerdriot.shop. It's one of the best ways to support what we're doing here at New Rockstars. Anakin talks about his place in this weird legacy family tree.
Look, when Obi-Wan taught me, we were keepers of the peace.
This echoes what Mace Windu worried about in Attack of the Clones.
We're keepers of the peace, not soldiers.
But Anakin continues.
But now, to win this war, I have to teach you to be a soldier.
Is that all I'll have to teach my own Padawan one day? How to fight?
Do you even want a Padawan?
It's fun for Anakin to acknowledge this, because Ahsoka's entire existence in Star Wars canon came from just a chat between George Lucas and Dave Filoni about whether Anakin Skywalker ever had a Padawan. George Lucas was like, yeah, he did, actually. And Anakin brushes off how much he really hates being a teacher.
I'm joking.
How can you joke at a time like this?
What would you prefer?
Yes, just another acknowledgement of the Clone Wars series and how Anakin and Ahsoka will often joke around in the middle of battle. Here we learn it's just how they're able to get through it.
Yeah.
Ahsoka asks,
what if I want to stop fighting?
Then you'll die.
Now, at this point, I don't think this is the actual transcript of the memory of Anakin talking. I don't think he ever actually said this to Ahsoka. Really, this is like Ahsoka's impression of future Vader seeping in, because as she watches him charge off with Rex and the others, an explosion briefly changes his silhouette to that of Darth Vader, and his lightsaber goes from blue to red. It looks awesome, but it's not just Anakin's change. It's the fact that when he's Anakin, he's flanked by clone troopers, his brothers, but when he's Vader, the clone troopers vanish, and he is alone.
See, I want to, about that too, when I was talking about how I think there's a mix and match of Anakin and her perception or memory of Anakin. I think it's about as much of a hybrid as it is of her in these scapes. Like if they came here together, much like she's her older self embodying her younger self in this memory, I believe that that is the spirit of Anakin embodying his past self there. And it's this hybridization of the two where it's her older mind and her younger body recontextualizing this memory. I think so too. He's influencing this memory as well. This memory is more of a subjective conversation between Ahsoka and Anakin about these events, which is another reason why when he joins her in the memory he was never a part of, he's back to being spirit Anakin the way we saw him originally. And he's like, I don't know this battle. I don't know this place. And that goes again to like another thing too that makes me think this is in fact Anakin, because I don't know that Ahsoka's subconscious, while it would know Anakin wasn't there, I don't know if it would manifest her construct of her own mind to acknowledge that fact. In any other medium that we've seen stuff do that in, they don't play it that way. The construct itself usually typically doesn't behave in that manner as if it is unaware of these facts. He comes in as an observer and he's like, hey, you know, you did pretty good here, like by his observation of how he just now learned of this thing. We also know that Anakin, his spirit has been pretty active around this point as well. You know, based on some journals and some of the canon stuff that has come out after the fact, you know, Luke has trained with Anakin, has conversed and communed with Anakin, and in some points, Anakin has physically, not physically, as a Force ghost, like intervened and saved Luke from these Force specters at one point as well. Like he's been active. It's not like he's just become one with the Force and his mission, his goals were over, but we've seen that he continued to mentor Luke in some ways as well. And, you know, he even showing up in his time of need, not being called on or anything like that, just because his son was in danger and he needed help. He showed up. And, you know, it's very well. I could see him very much so. It's wholly believable to me that during this time he would do the same for Ahsoka as well.
I'm pretty sure that Ahsoka's reaction here is not what young Ahsoka actually saw and did in the actual battle of Ryloth from Clone Wars. We are really back to a subjective impression of this memory. Adult Ahsoka reliving this moment with the knowledge of what Anakin would become. Because really, technically, that's what memories are. We don't really remember things exactly as they happened. When we think back on a memory, we are remembering how we felt the last time we thought about that event. Every memory we have is a derivation of the last time we thought about that event. So as we get older, it's diminishing returns in a complex web of emotions as we've thought back through our life. And yes, seeing Anakin suddenly turning into Vader is just like the moment in the Lothal Jedi Temple in Rebels Season 2 Episode 18, where her vision of Anakin turned into a vision of Vader, and the flickering aspect of it recalls Ezra's view of Palpatine in the Rebels finale and pieces of that Lothal Jedi Temple. Now the 3 X-Wing pilots left after the Eye of Sion took off in Episode 4 are Carson Teva, Lander, that's Brennan Wayne, who along with Lateef Crowder does the physical work for the Mandalorian Din Djarin, and Jinsu, played by Chow No-Mova. While piloting with that photo of Kanan looking right at her, Hera says,
I got us out here chasing ghosts.
Yeah, ghost pilot chasing ghosts, nice wordplay, and she asks,
Huyang, where are they? People don't just vanish into thin air.
Well, no. Normally, no.
Huyang must know that sometimes, whether it's Obi-Wan or Yoda or Night Brother Marok, sometimes that is just how these people go. The ghost skims the waves, leading to this awesome transition to the sounds of blasters and lightsabers. Okay, so now Ahsoka,
Yep.
slightly older, now wielding 2 blue lightsabers, finds herself in the Siege of Mandalore, depicted in Clone Wars Season 7, episodes 9 through 12, which is set concurrently with the events of Revenge of the Sith. See, by Season 5, Ahsoka had begun to use her green lightsaber and a shorter yellow-green Shoto, both of which she lost on Coruscant at the end of Season 5 during the drama with that false accusation of her bombing the Jedi Temple that led to her parting ways with the Order. So these 2 blue blades actually came from Anakin later on in Season 7, when they reunited right before they parted ways. Anakin to the Battle of Coruscant that we saw in Revenge of the Sith, and Ahsoka to the Siege of Mandalore that we saw in Clone Wars Season 7 in 2020, set in the city of Sundari. She was
Check out my reactions.
liberated from Maul. Again, these 2 events were happening at the same time, and it's why Anakin doesn't remember it, because he wasn't there. Now, Ahsoka duels with more confidence now, and Ariana Greenblatt does a really good job aging herself throughout this episode.
Yes, she
carries
does.
herself with Ahsoka's more jaded stride. I don't know what it
And nailing those moves. Like, she pulled off some really like classic Ahsoka maneuvers in the little bit of combat that we see in those moments too.
is about her just crossing her arms as Ahsoka, or Hayden Christensen crossing his arms and looking over at Snips. It just perfectly evokes what we remember from Clone Wars. Now, the Mandalorians as she fights have red and black armor with horned helmets. These are members of Maul's Death Watch. After Maul took over that group in Season 5, killing their previous leader Pre Vizsla with a darksaber, and even after Maul's temporary capture by Sidious, this branch of the Death Watch stayed loyal to Maul and fashioned their armor to look like him. Meanwhile, the Clone Troopers did the same for Ahsoka. Part of the 501st Battalion broke off to form the new 332nd, led by Commander Rex, and they painted their helmets to evoke Ahsoka's orange and white Togruta markings. You can actually see some of those helmets in the background in the scene. And we actually hear Tamara Morrison's voice as Rex.
Nice work, Commander. We'll secure the perimeter.
Even though for some reason his isn't. I was like, it stood out. I was like, wait a second. Am I remembering this wrong? Or this could be her mind remembering him this way and not a production mistake.
Rex didn't do the orange paint, he just kind of did the markings in blue. And if you look back at that scene in Ryloth, that kind of looks like they just made one helmet for Rex. That's okay, we can forgive that. Now,
but right, when they were at the siege, he also had the helmet too, right? Okay, no. He didn't have it. He didn't have it. Okay, that's fine. We're fine. We're clear on that. Sorry, it's my mistake.
Now, all of this would be right before Ahsoka would run back into Maul and have her epic duel with him, and that would lead right into Order 66. So this is a pivotal moment in history where she's talking with Anakin, and Anakin says,
Ahsoka, within you will be everything I am, all the knowledge I possess, just as I inherited knowledge from my master, and he from his. We're part of a legacy.
We are reminded of Ahsoka and Huyang's line about Ahsoka's legacy of atypical Jedi, and just remember the links to the chain are Sabine, Ahsoka, Anakin, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, Dooku, and Yoda. All of them pretty weird, but Anakin also echoes what Yoda will tell Anakin's son in The Last Jedi. I think one of the most important lines in all of Star Wars.
We are what they grow beyond.
That is the true burden of all masters.
As much as I love the title of Shadow Warrior, and again, I'm going to explain why at the end of this video, I think a really good implicit title of this episode would just be The Burden of All Masters.
That would be a good one.
But my part of that legacy is one of death and war.
But you're more than that.
But for Ahsoka, more means more powerful, more dangerous than anyone ever realized. But Anakin gets fed up, and he says,
Is that what this is about?
Yeah.
Back to the beginning.
See, that's the thing too, where she's still hung up. Her hang up is on her guilt and her fear of what happened to Anakin. You know, not being there to help prevent that turn, and her fear of the fact that that happened anyway. Like she said in The Mandalorian, is like, even the best of us fell to the dark side. You know, she fears what she might pass on with her training incomplete the way it was, let alone who she learned from. You know, what does that mean? Is what she learned, is all of the lessons she learned tainted by death, by her time as a soldier, by her master who became this mass murderer? Is all these gifts and talents and skills tainted by that? Is she doomed to pass on the same thing to anybody she may take on under her own studentship later? You know, there's this hang up. You know, she's stuck running in place. She's going nowhere, as she said before, because she's afraid of where that might go. will she die or lead others to death like she's done in her past? She led those clone troopers to death. Who will pay the price for her decisions that she makes in the present day? That's why her attempt to train Sabine failed. She questions herself. She questions her teachings. She questions everything about what she's doing. It's one of the reasons why she chose not to train Grogu, that she couldn't train Grogu. You know, she's just so afraid of this legacy. And Baylan knew this. And that's why he chose those words too, because he can sense those fears. Like, just like when he sensed Sabine's desire to save Ezra in that fight with her, she's like, you and your master's legacy is one of death and destruction. Again, trying to dig into those insecurities. And it worked. It worked. It got a rise out of her. It put her off balance. Even to the point when, you know, Shin showed up without her, that she lashed out in fear against her and slammed her into that wall with a force choke. You know, we saw that shakiness, that shaken, broken ground that Ahsoka has been living her life on ever since, in full view right there. And he was just digging his fingers into that wound and just turning it. And that's what this whole thing is about, her defining her legacy. And this is what, when Anakin says, is that what this is about? Because he found that moment. He found what has been holding her up, is when she turned to him and she's like, you know, and yeah, you're right. I was more, and you were more too, more powerful, more dangerous than anybody ever thought. And he's like, that's what the problem is. And that's when he changes tactics. He becomes the thing she's afraid of, the thing she's been running from, the thing she never got to finish that face-off in Malachor against. She doesn't have that closure, and he's here to give her that closure, because without it, she's never going to be able to move forward. Because it's just this thing that has just been blocked, this literal, physical, and emotional roadblock in her life was Anakin's downfall. Because she doesn't know how much of a part she played in it, or what parts of him became a part of her as well. So she's always afraid that that could be a potentiality for her or whoever she might teach. So now he's like, okay, you've got to face this, because I'm more than that. That's what he meant when he said that, because she doesn't see the other part of it. She needs to see the other part of it. Like, he's not just Vader. He's not just the mistakes he made. He's not just the bad he did. You know, he's got a whole life he led without any of that got discounted because of that mistake. There's so much more before he ever became Vader that he passed on to her. There's so much more to who she is than even just being Anakin's apprentice. But that's all she's been able to define her life as. Ever since that moment, is that one gigantic stain, much like that same stain completely derails Leia's political campaign or career once that becomes known, because once that's known, that's all you think of. It's like, that's Vader's daughter. We can't trust her, despite all the good she's ever done. But that's what Ahsoka has done to herself. And she's got to learn to push past that, or she might as well die. She might as well stop living her life if she can't see that she is more than the mistakes of her master, that she is the legacy of, she carries on the legacy of so much more than just his mistakes. His successes, his master's legacies, lessons, the ideals of the Jedi that didn't fail. You know, failure is in itself a teacher, right? The greatest teacher. And she's just afraid to see those lessons or to learn from those lessons. It's just, it's so good. It's so good. There's so much being said in this episode with so little. And it's so brilliant.
Yes, so Anakin.
Anyway, sorry.
In the beginning of the lesson.
Live or die.
But this time, time, the blade is Vader red, and he faces away from her just as he initially did to Obi-Wan on Mustafar, and his eyes burn red as they did when the lava burned his flesh and the hate took over. But really there, it was the skin around his eyes that turned red. His pupils were more orangey yellow. Here, they are just red because something different is happening.
No, they're yellow with the red. It's the same. When we get a good look at it later.
Yes, this is
Dude, I love how his stance and his form completely shifts too.
Totally the soprano vocal notes from Duel of the Fates. Now, what is really happening here? This is not truly evil Vader taking over. This is Ahsoka's subconscious projection of Anakin wearing a performative mask because he realizes what haunts Ahsoka, it's not her role in wars past, but really her guilt over what Anakin became after she left him.
Okay, this is where we might disagree. Rather than her subconscious acknowledging the problem and switching in a way that is necessary for her to move forward, I feel like that's Anakin. Again, like we talked about, I wholly think this is Anakin intervening, and he has now realized what the problem is and has become what she needs to face to move forward, which is why at the end, once she passes the test, he's like, there's hope for you yet. You know, it's just like, I don't think that's her subconscious. There's a debate that could be had there, but I don't think that she herself knows what she needs, even subconsciously on her own, to get through what she needs to get through. At least to this extent. I don't know that it would play out this way, but we'll see. I would love to hear Dave talk about this episode. I know there's 1,000 ways this can be interpreted, but I am still 1,000% on the side that this is Anakin himself using her mindscape and the world between worlds to get her out of this funk.
So he is playing this part to help Ahsoka work through this fear of a failed student-teacher relationship. Ahsoka goes for her own Palpatine lunge, and Anakin catches it, disappointed. He twists her arm back and kicks her through the fog, and adult Ahsoka lands back in the world between worlds.
So now we're out of the memory.
Yes, that is Vader's breathing there, and the lightning flashes to flicker him into Vader charging at her.
God, it's so cool.
Palpatine in the Rebels finale. But really what's happening here is Anakin is saying, okay, Snips, you really need that rematch with Vader after Malachor because the fight was prematurely ended by the world between worlds, huh? Fine, I'll give you Vader. This is what you want. Let's go. Let's get it out of your system.
Also, don't be mistaken here. He is not trying to kill her. Because I know people have made it about the whole besting part of it. That's not the lesson. The lesson isn't physically beating Anakin. The lesson isn't overpowering Vader or overpowering Anakin. The lesson is her choice to accept what is, what was, and what will be, to choose life, to move on, to live her life and stop living in this stagnant, never moving treadmill of a life she's created for herself. You can even tell in the choreography after a point, he's not trying to do anything like that. He's trying to push her. He's trying to get her to wake up. That's all it is. So like, people need to, again, there's a group of people that need to fucking chill.
Anakin says,
"You lack conviction."
They did a voice effect on Hayden's voice to make it sound like it was filtered through Vader's mask. Kind of like when we heard both Matt Lanter and James Earl Jones' voice in that Malachor fight. And when they fight, Ahsoka crosses her lightsabers to catch Anakin's red, forming this cool asterisk image, echoing a very similar shot in their duel on Malachor in Rebels. This duel is them finally finishing that one. And it's just kind of fun to watch this and think about how this is the Darth Vader that Palpatine wanted. And because of Obi-Wan scarring the crap out of him, Vader was forever limited to a techno-organic suit, which, don't get me wrong, looks awesome, and Star Wars would not be Star Wars without it, but let's be honest, Hayden is on fire here. Ahsoka is only able to defeat Anakin when her lightsabers get knocked out of her hand, and she switches to using only evasive maneuvers and takes control of his red lightsaber, and that disarming happens off-screen. It's the same exact way that Anakin disarms Dooku when they fought in front of Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith.
I saw a supercut. I can't remember where it was too. That's a signature Ahsoka. Well, I guess she probably learned it from him too, because like he said, it is the same one it used there. But we've seen her use that same disarm technique many times, actually. From one of the Inquisitors she fought, actually 2 Inquisitors she's fought before. You know, same exact sweeping motion and everything against Maul and here. Like I saw a supercut of all the times she's done that same disarming maneuver, which, like you said, matches up right here. Oh, which is another moment of life and death. Oh, another moment of life and death. Oh, if we're comparing these moments right here, Anakin, when he chose, even though he's not Vader yet, this is the turning point of that. He chose not to spare. He knew he shouldn't. He knew he shouldn't have. He's like, a Jedi shouldn't have done what he did, but he chose death for Dooku here. But now Ahsoka's got Anakin at blade point and chooses life. You know, she, much like with Obi-Wan and Obi-Wan, when he had the moment to execute Vader, he had him dead to rights. He's like, no, there's no sense in it. He chose not to do that. So at the same time, he's choosing life. Though there's a different reason there, but it's also the same choice that's being made. You know, once he realizes that what happened to Anakin wasn't his fault, and that's another thing Ahsoka needs to realize as well in this, as a part of this training, was that what happened to Anakin was Anakin's doing and not her own. That was his choice, his conviction. Like he said earlier, she lacked conviction. She's been not making a choice or making a stand for a long time. Like, she's helped with the rebellion and all that stuff. She's been doing good, but as far as for her life has been on standstill ever since. You know, regardless of what Anakin chose, right or wrong, he chose and he stood by the choice until Luke came in. Ahsoka's been in a position where she's been kind of keeping that choice at arm's length for a really long time. But both Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, 2 people who were greatly wounded by Anakin's fall, both needed to realize that that was not something that they should carry on. There was nothing they could have done. And maybe one could argue if they had known what was going to happen, maybe together or maybe individually, what if, 1,000 different what if possibilities, if they could have maybe stopped him from doing what he did. But it was his choice in the end, not theirs. So, you know, they needed to lose that burden. And we saw that happen with Obi-Wan there when Anakin was like, you didn't kill Anakin, I did. And that's kind of, we're seeing a similar realization here. But anyway, that got off on a whole other tangent. Anakin chose at blade point to kill Dooku while she's got Anakin at blade point, the person who's been the bane of her entire existence since his fall at blade point, and chooses non-violence, life. Just like it came down to life and death at her birth in Tales of the Jedi and onward. Her legacy will not be one of death and destruction, but one of life. And she is reborn.
And so we think we are headed for a beheading.
I'm sorry, I've been talking so much this episode. I've been holding a shit ton in all week for this.
Ahsoka even steps in close so that the red glows in her eyes too. Here is when the hate is closest to her grasp. And what does she do? She deactivates the saber, she tosses it aside, and she says,
I choose to live.
She makes a different choice than Anakin made with Dooku. She chooses to live. And I love how Hayden shows that evil melting away from his face. He looks down and he looks back up at Ahsoka.
Dude, this might be the best Anakin performance Hayden's ever given. And I love him as Anakin through all the ups and downs, but this is just and he does this thing that makes it so very much his Anakin, but as well as, because we know he's talked about it at great length that he's when he's been invited back into this world, he's made sure to watch everything that's been done. He's watched all of Rebels, all of Clone Wars. He's, familiar with Matt Lanter's work. And you can even see down to certain mannerisms that he's copied straight out of the Clone Wars when he did that flashback, that he's done his homework. Like, this feels like the most Anakin that's ever Anakin to me.
The mask has been lifted. He's back to his good-natured mentor.
There's
hope for you yet.
It's just another good lesson from Clone Wars era Anakin, and it's awesome. See, Baylan had put Ahsoka back in a toxic headspace of thinking she was part of a cursed legacy of failed mentors. Sabine, in her eyes, was just evidence of this failure. So this lesson between life and death is really Ahsoka acquiring a new perspective on mentorship, to see her training not as failed, but just incomplete. It's the same way she sees her mentorship with Sabine now. Just as Anakin appeared in this space, he vanishes behind the same shoulder. There's an incredible visual where one path of the world between worlds collapses in on Ahsoka's path, forming a line of a reflective water surface. Briefly, we see two mirrored Ahsokas, and Ahsoka sinks into herself. So the two polar ends of Ahsoka's consciousness find each other in the middle, and finally she reaches balance. Since everything Ahsoka saw in the world between worlds was blue and fluid, now it melts back into the sea. It's just implied that Ahsoka physically envisioned this experience while floating in the ocean the entire time, as the Force manipulated the world around her into a construct where she could work through these issues. As Ahsoka floats, her arms are outstretched in a Christ pose, as we are witnessing the character undergoing a resurrection. X-Wing pilot Jensu dives in Coast Guard style to get her, and Lander pulls her up, and we definitely hear a voice through the
I mean, also, if we had to think about it, I don't know, like, Togruta physiology that well. She's been down there for a long fucking time. So that would be quite the feat. But again, Carson Teva and his sensors do not lie, dude.
Or saying Ahsoka here. Is that Anakin calling to her though? Because it kind of sounds female. Could it be Sabine? Are the master and apprentice finally linked through the Force? While Cetos as a planet has always been stormy up until this point, finally the clouds break and sunlight beams into Ahsoka to awaken her on her bunk on the T6. Now she doesn't wear her headband, so we see the barrier between her orange brow and her white laku. Outside, Ahsoka dons a white garment, and later she fully suits up wearing these same robes that she wears in the Rebels finale episode, showing how she's completed her journey into Gandalf the White. What we thought was death was actually transformation into enlightenment. Ahsoka once again uses psychometry to read the split sphere. This is Jedi
dude, and her personality is 180 from where she's been this entire time. And like, it's just something like people's like, oh, she's not as peppy, as energetic as Ahsoka used to be in the Clone Wars and Rebels and stuff. And like, she's been through some shit, dude. Every appearance from here and all the live action appearances, like, it's just been so apparent. She's still carrying so much of this weight. And this is so many years after any of the times we've seen her. Many, many, many years since any of the last times we've seen her. And she's carrying a lot of that pain, man. And it's like, and now she's unburdened by it. She's got through her hangups that she's been having, that have been holding her back, that have been weighing her down. Like a literal, like, mountains worth of weight has been lifted off her shoulders. And you know what? We see her the happiest and the carefreest we've seen her in a long time at the end of that episode. I saw some people say that she acted exactly the same as she began the episode by the end of it, that there was no change at the end of the episode. And I'm like, you are smoking something, because I don't know what the hell you watched. Because I swear to you, I saw some people say that she's no different at the end of this episode than she was at the beginning of the episode, or at the beginning of this show so far. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Quinlan Voss's old Force ability to hear a recording of recent history based on an impression it leaves on an object or a location. Mon Mothma calls in to order Hera and Ahsoka to return to Coruscant, saying the Senate Oversight Committee is going to vote on whether to suspend her command, and they pilot the T6 and the Ghost directly into a pod of Purgle, and the largest one looms in right in front of Ahsoka on the wing. She loves going out on this wing. The imagery and the scale reminds me of Paul Atreides facing a sandworm in Dune.
Oh, yeah.
To the Baylan. These are whales' brushy teeth. Denis Villeneuve actually used the same anatomical effect on the interior mouth of the sandworms. Whales have these as filters for the stuff that flows openly into their mouths.
I saw a tweet about this, and I completely forgot about it. I know they had changed some things about the Purgle's look in the animation, like many things they've changed. I completely forgot they had rocky, bouldery, stubbly little teeth in the show, and they made him more anatomically well-like, which I do appreciate. I wonder if anybody's been bothered by that though.
Carson Teva faces New Republic Mon Calamari cruisers led by Captain Gerard, played by Asa Davis. Her first officer is the Ishi Tib race, which first appeared in Return of the Jedi. Carson reminds us that he's from the Adelphi base, which I'm pretty sure is that X-Wing and Y-Wing bar that we saw in The Mandalorian Season 3. Jason says,
"It's just like the stories you told me. How the whales together and the bad guys far, far away."
Far, far away. He describes the events of the Rebels finale using the language of the famous
galaxy.
text of Star Wars.
Where are we going? A galaxy far, far away. And it's a spiral galaxy. And we know that C-3PO, the Millennium Falcon and stuff appear in the hieroglyphs on Earth in the Indiana Jones movies. Is it all connected? Is Peridia in the Milky Way, or am I just taking this somewhere else now?
A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. This is the first Star Wars title that's taken us from one far, far away galaxy to a completely different one. As Ahsoka uses the Force to communicate with a Purrgil, its massive blue eye looks at her. And like Jonah in the Old Testament, and Pinocchio, and Dory, and Marlin, and Finding Nemo, Ahsoka and Huyang nestle themselves in the belly of the whale. Actually, riding a sea animal on some mysterious, super powerful current is exactly what Dory and Marlin do, riding Crush through the East Australian current. How old is that Purrgil? 150, dude, and still young.
There was plenty of room in there also for Hera and them to go. Just saying.
Ahsoka tells Huyang,
"We'll just see where it goes."
It could go anywhere.
I know. But that's better than going nowhere.
This is the happiest we've seen
Yep.
Ahsoka on this series. She is a true Gandalf the White, having aged out of this world and eager to embark on the next great adventure west through the Grey Havens. Choir voices ring out as the Purrgils swim past the New Republic cruisers. And I love how you can see the X-Wing docking bays as they float past, looking so small, giving us a sense of scale compared to the people who would be in those bays. Gerard and her bridge are helpless to just watch, kind of like Thrawn and the Chimera in the Rebels finale. And there's this awesome visual effect as the Alpha Purrgil passes the engine of the cruiser and its eye reflects blue. It's kind of like when you take a picture of a cat, it gets a laser eye effect. It's because it's part of the eye called the tapetum lucidum. The Purrgil charge up, and from the other side of the baleen teeth, Ahsoka and Huyang see this horizontal line of light with streaks of purple.
I mean, it's
in their
also
cockpit.
charging
We
up
do not
for
see the stretching stars effect that we are used to seeing for hyperspace jump in Star Wars.
when they're about
This
to jump,
version
their
is
eyes do
hidden
that
from
though.
us. Ahsoka is only able to see it through this narrow slit, kind of like Oppenheimer watching the Trinity test through his special eye gear. It's because unlike the World Between Worlds, this is a trip through the heavens that mortals are not meant to see the process of. So Ahsoka begins this episode in the dark with the Shadow Warrior, and she ends bathed in light. But who was the Shadow Warrior exactly? What does that really mean? Well, we are reminded of Shadow Warrior, aka Akira Kurosawa's Kagemusha, an amazing 1980 film which had an international version that was executive produced by George Lucas. So in Japanese, a Kagemusha is a political decoy.
Right.
A politician to draw attention away from the real leader who might be dead or alien or under threat. It's exactly what Padme Amidala did with her decoys, or Dave in the movie Dave. So in this episode, Anakin performs the Kagemusha role, a doppelganger who gives a theatrical performance to impersonate a fallen warlord of Darth Vader. Darth Vader himself, based on Kurosawa imagery, of course.
Nice.
So that Ahsoka can finally finish her battle with Vader and learn her final lesson. Still, ultimately, a shadow, a warrior impersonating a ghost. But why do we see ghosts? Not because of the ghost's unfinished business, but because of our own. Please support this channel by grabbing
Great
an
breakdown, man.
Fulcrum shirt available at nerdriot.shop. Be sure to
check out their shop. That was a really good breakdown. I'm not going to talk at the end of this at all, really. I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to wrap this up because my God, have I been rambling this entire time. I've said my piece. I think we were in the world between worlds. I think that was Anakin. That's where I'll end it because those are the only things I think have been up for debate amongst a lot of people. You know, I think there is a mix and match of certain elements within, but I think Anakin himself's hand had a play in what all transpired as well through her subjective melding of the world between worlds when she entered it. Yeah, anyway, that's where I stand on it. But I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you all think? Where do you stand? What are your feelings? Was there any Easter eggs that you guys caught that maybe they missed in the breakdown? Let me know. Sound off the comments. Let me know your thoughts down below. We'll carry on the conversation after the video. Hope you enjoyed the reaction. If you did, leave a like, drop a comment, subscribe if you're not already. Make sure to subscribe to Rockstars if you are not already. Link to their channel will be in the description as well. Follow me on all my socials. All that shit's down there. Before we go, I want to shout out our channel legends: Manny Sher, Ryan, Karen, Yori, Corey Scott, Margaret Grace, Melita, Robert Anguiano, Jeffrey Hale, M. Sephiroth, Jake Contrell, Eric Official, and Amy Beckett. Thank you guys so much for continued support. That's it for this video, guys. I'll see you all in the next one. But until then, may the Force be with you always. Take care, everybody.